When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow.
Welcome to the OShow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. And thank goodness the Scandal panel is back because, oh my God, we are doing these now on Fridays, partly because it's summer and everyone's busy, but also because I think for some of these conversations, if you're one of those people who happens to imbibe here in Canada of one kind of thing or another, maybe you want to do that right now because what has happened since the last OShow? Blowing my mind, even getting ready to host this program. And we literally have had a new war start in the Middle East in the last 24 hours. We have Russia upping its attack on Ukraine. We have the Trump regime trying to militarily invade Los Angeles, even so much as throwing down a US senator for trying to ask a question. And of course, on top of all of that backdrop, we've got Carney about to host the G7 in Alberta, inviting world leaders, including Zelensky and the president of Mexico. So it is the place on earth that everyone is going to be watching to see what the hell is going on. And we have in Alberta the separatist movement. The premier is still going on about it. We've got explosive new reporting in Ontario with the Ford administration around the Greenbelt scandal that just came out today, which is why the scandal panel was started in the first place, because that scandal was so massive. So, like I said, if you need a drink, now's the time, everybody. So Mark Cripps emailed me. We don't normally talk topics. And he said, Laura, what are we talking about? I got so many thoughts. I'm like, anything, all of it, like where to begin, where to end. But as always, we start with Keith Leslie because he is our veteran journalist on the panel and keeps us in line. Keith, where would you like to start, my friend? I mean, pick. It is all needing to be discussed.
Well, I think we'll spend a lot more time in the global affairs and we'll get to that in the G7. But I'd like to start, of course, one of my favorite topics in Ontario is the Greenbelt. And what we got this week was yet another report condemning the government for its actions, basically, and the actions of its staff in using every conceivable method they could to not have paper records or any sort of electronic records even that could be accessed under freedom of information regarding which lands were going to be removed from the Greenbelt. Remember, when those lands were removed from the Greenbelt, they went from being worth several millions of dollars to $8.7 billion in, I think that was 2018 dollars. So, the Lord knows what they're worth now. So this was astronomical money. And we found out that we already knew that the government, that there was a lot of records. They were using personal devices, which you're not allowed to use in government. They also, apparently, one of their little tricks was, they had names, pet names, project names for the Greenbelt. They would use GB, which that was, okay, I can decipher that. They also use G asterisk asterisk. Well, that's a wild card, of course, as we all know when you're doing a search. What that got you was every word that begins with G. So you might have actually turned up some documents, but you'd never find them. And so it's like, a lawyer papering you with every, cartons and cartons of paper when you want one document. That's essentially what they did here to hide their tracks. And the commissioner, basically, the Information Privacy Commissioner, basically said, there's no documents on the actual decisions. Who made the decisions and when? Like, the core of this is still stinky, stinky, rotten. We used to talk about the stench of the Greenbelt before the government reversed itself. Well, the smell is still there. I mean, the behavior of some government and ex-government officials, but we remember Dalton McGuinty's former chief of staff, the former Liberal premier, his chief of staff went to jail for wiping out electronic records, in their case, in pertaining to two gas plants the Liberals had changed in 2011. He went to jail for that. Yeah. Here we have, and this comes back to, I know no one directs the police, but maybe somebody should. They've been investigating the RCMP. The OPP handed it off to the RCMP. The RCMP has been looking at it for a year and a half. This sounds like pretty clear evidence of something the police would be interested in, and yet we have nothing. I mean, if you're going to send a Liberal to jail, maybe a Conservative, anyway, I'm sure it's not about the politics, but what on earth have the RCMP been doing for 18 months when, all sorts of government reports have come out and the Information and Privacy Commissioner was asked, are you going to be willing to cooperate? Have the OPP or the RCMP, contacted you? No. Would you be willing to cooperate? Well, that's speculative, and I can't blame the commissioner for saying that. They haven't even contacted you. It's what exactly is the RCMP doing? There's evidence being presented to them in official report form, reports that have actually the power of subpoena if they need behind them. And where are we here? We're still back to basically we just don't know who said what to whom and who made the decisions in the Greenbelt scandal, and that's just plain out wrong.
And where art thee, RCMP? Kathleen Wynne, the former premier, was on this program and said that she had heard that people were being talked to and interviewed I mean, where is that going? Usually you start with the lower people on the, and then you build up towards possibly the premier's office. But we've seen so much on the Greenbelt scandal, guys, in the last almost 2 years that would indicate there's probably criminal behavior happening here. And the people of Ontario have been pushed through another rush election, gave this premier with a low voter turnout another majority. He is a Trump acolyte, and he put through Bill 5 that takes away the rights of municipalities and others to be consulted and to stop things that could end up being taking the Greenbelt. So we are watching Ford rule by fiat in this province. We have evidence it looks like of direct corruption, of trying to hide things. I mean, nothing says corruption like secret codes on government documents so people can't find them. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's ridiculous that we have not heard from the RCMP. And even though Ford's got another majority, Mark, there is no reason why the people of Ontario should not be screaming for some accountability here. And even though Ford took off another zillion-day vacation after giving himself a 35% raise, these Greenbelt revelations are another reason why the people of Ontario should be showing up outside his Ford Fest like they did with the Greenbelt 2 years ago and saying, you can't take our Greenbelt. You cannot trick us and lie to us and be this corrupt in our face without some kind of accountability. Mark?
The irony in all of this is that, corruption seems to be normalized in this modern era of politics now. I mean, and the other thing that, strikes me about the dragging on of this police investigation is, and, I say this as somebody who my entire life has strongly supported law enforcement. I have staunchly supported law enforcement, but I feel like law enforcement in this country and in the US has picked a side. And if this was a Liberal government or an NDP government with this kind of scandal on them, we would have record levels of police investigation. People would be going to jail. This is what troubles me more than anything. And I think the government, to a certain degree, is kind of riding on this, our buddies, the police aren't going to do anything about it. So, we'll skate through this one again. I mean, and also as somebody who worked in government, as a political staffer, right? I mean, it's one thing to be a bureaucrat, but when you're a political staffer, there's this feeling that you serve your master. And I always believed that. And my master was the Ontario public. They paid my salary, not the Liberal Party, not Kathleen Winter, Dalton McGuinty. I was paid by the people of Ontario. I was accountable to them. Did we have freedom of information requests that came through? Did it scare us sometimes and what might be found? Sure. But nobody was fucking emailing in code language. Nobody was like, this is like, again, it's a kingdom. It's like these people think that they are running a kingdom and accountability doesn't matter. And next time I hear Doug Ford say, we have the most transparent government in their history, like, give me a break. Everybody should be horrified at how, when we peel the layers off this onion, it gets worse and worse and worse. And on top of that, the housing crisis in Ontario is worse than ever. Nothing's getting built. The market is crashing. And all of this was to just enrich. None of this property was ever going to get built. It was never going to be developed. It was just to make these guys rich. Like, have we heard this before?
Oh, and it's so frustrating. I know we're going to get to foreign affairs later, but honestly, Keith, I don't feel like we can talk about anything without talking about what's happening in the US, because we know that Ford got reelected because of Trump, because he said he'd stand up to the big bad wolf, even though he himself is a wolf acting exactly the same way as Trump, and was really happy when Trump got reelected. But Canadians were scared, Ontarians were scared in January, and Trump took advantage and Ford took advantage, and boom, we've got this Ford government who is following Trump's playbook. Doug Ford is following Trump's playbook. And it's not just that he's having these stupid hot dog festivals while people on ODSP are starving like starving and the food lines are getting longer and longer. It's not just that kind of cruelty that is going on. It's the fact that there's this shameless corruption right in our face and no fear of any kind of investigation. So to Mark's point, I mean, if you guys saw the reaction of the soldiers of the 81st Airborne at Fort Bragg cheering Trump when he went after elected officials, right? And you're watching that and you're going, holy shit. If the RCMP won't stand up to Doug Ford, how far away are we really from the shit we're seeing in the US? And I'm not raising, I mean, believe me, I just ran the mountain stairs in Hamilton before I got on here to calm the fuck down. And this is my level of calm the fuck down after an hour of running in the woods. So Keith, please, Mike,
Well,
where you want to take it.
I think to bolster your point about Ford's behavior, the Bill 5, which was basically an omnibus bill, as so many of them are from this government, so that means there's a ton of shit in there. And basically, one thing it did was eliminate the Endangered Species Act. Eliminate it. Cabinet will now decide when a species is at risk. And their habitat has been redefined to their nest or their den, not the area around it. Anyway, that unfortunately is just a side note. I want to mention it for all our, the environmentalists who actually really do care, and it's a serious, serious thing. But that's sadly a side note in Bill 5, which is allowing the government to create what it calls special economic zones. The whole point of Bill 5, according to the government, is get things built. Save Ontario's economy with getting things built. Takes 15 years, they say, to get a mine borehole even drilled just to start. They want to, and if that's a problem, okay, that needs to be addressed. But by Bill 5, he's creating what Ford government calls special economic zones. And within those zones, and this could be for a project like the Ring of Fire project, a road getting into there, or the mine itself, or a company that was a big donor to the Conservatives on a project, something like this. And within that special economic zone, and the government gets to determine where they are, provincial and municipal rules, including environmental regulations, will not apply. They can be exempt from all of them, including you can't sue over these things. They put that in virtually every bill now. You can't sue us for what we're doing here. But it's basically hamstringing anyone who can raise any sort of a legitimate objection where normal would have been a legitimate objection to a project. Basically, well, no, it's a special economic zone. The government can determine exactly what goes on there. And no longer, this is me paraphrasing here, but no longer is a salamander going to hold up construction of a new development or a project or something that the government considers is necessary to help the economy. And of course, I haven't even touched on the fact that they did not even think of, or maybe they thought of it, but they did not do it intentionally, consult with the First Nations on this. And of course, a lot of these special economic zones, especially the Ring of Fire, the most pressing one, according to the government, are in First Nations territories. And they've been working for years. Kathleen Wynne talked about how she spent 2 years negotiating with them just to talk about a road. I mean, and here we've got no consulting, and the government says, well, we'll ram it. They ram the bill through the legislature, 1 hour hearings or something crazy, and said, well, we'll consult the First Nations over the summer. Well, they've now got chiefs who are actually in favor of the Ring of Fire signed onto the project. Even they're upset with what's gone on here. And there's been threats of, raising more First Nations protests like we saw 10, 11 years ago with Idle No More. There's talks of threatening to bring that back just because of the government's actions on Bill 5. So clearly this is a government acting very much in a dictatorial manner, if you will. I mean, more than authoritarianism. We're just going to basically exempt all the rules. Fortunately, they can't exempt federal rules, so there will still be federal environmental and regulations going on around some of these projects. But we've already seen, and we need to see now, how closely the federal government, because it's going to push, it has legislation as well to push projects getting through quicker, how closely are these two governments going to harmonize? And is that going to just broaden the attack for First Nations who feel they're not being consulted and that they believe they have a veto and the courts say they don't? This is going to lead to a lot of trouble if the government keeps pushing through. And the Ford government has already started pushing through by ramming it through the legislature, like a day of hearings. The committee tried to have another day. Nope. 1 hour debate. Boom, it's done.
Right.
And the legislature's adjourned till October.
No, you're bolstering my Trumpy point. I mean, the way
Yes.
that the opposition had to filibuster through the night is something we just saw down in Washington on Trump's big, beautiful, bad bill. Bill 5 was similar to that. And, the point that you made there about, of course, the failure to consult with the First Nations and Indigenous people was against the Constitution. They're going to sue. And you know what? Ontario taxpayers are going to have to pay for the government side of that lawsuit. But I mean, have at. They have a right to sue this government. But when there were talks about potential protest, did you remember what Ford said?
Yeah.
Well, I hope they consider that carefully because, you know, RCMP. So the RCMP is going to come out full-throated if there are protests by First Nations, but the RCMP has fuck all to say about this premier's corruption. How are we not supposed to be freaked out by that? And this is not just for people in Ontario. Ontario is a massive province in this country. I know we have viewers from across this country. If Ford gets away with this kind of shit here, you know, watch what they're going to try to pull more in Alberta than they're already doing and elsewhere in this country. I mean, this is MAGA tactics. This is scary stuff. And while we have Mark Carney running this country, I do not think we have lost our democracy. I don't think we're anywhere near where the US is, but damn, that is a giant sinkhole and we're not too fucking far away from the center of it. So, Mark.
Well, I think, you know, unfortunately, we're in a time now where people have decided to usurp or, you know, get over or let go of what makes us human. And it's all just kind of like, you know, when I see like polls come out about, you know, Trump's actions in California and stuff like that, I mean, it has changed, but initially the polling was very supportive of the actions that were being taken, and he keeps ramping it up. He keeps testing the water. Well, how far can I go? And the problem is that, you know, I think of like California Governor Newsom's victory in the courts yesterday. You know, basically the courts have told Trump he had no right. He needs to hand over control of the National Guard back to California. Big victory for Newsom.
But that's been stayed, though. That's been stayed by the court.
I know. I understand that, but it's been stayed. However, the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Trump or Ford or Smith or any of these sort of like really strong people style, leadership style. They're willing to test how far the limits. They're willing to test the limits because there are no consequences. There's no consequence. So okay, so Trump does this. It's they overrule it or they stay it or whatever. They challenge it. But at the end of the day, what's the consequence, right? So if you do things like, so we get back to Ontario, you know, what's the consequence to the Ford government to act in this way when they just got a bigger majority government, when the Ontario public seems quite fine, whether it was being sucked in by the anti-Trump bullshit that he was spreading or whatever. You know, there was more to it than just that. He won for other reasons than just that. And I think that we've become a society now where we're like, yeah, you know, fuck those rules. You know, fuck justice. Fuck people's rights. You know what? And ironically, most of the people pushing this were the people who were fucking challenging the vaccine mandates and who were against vaccinations. And they were like, don't fuck with my freedom, man. And now they're like, fuck with everybody's freedom, man. It's like crazy. Everything has gone upside down.
It's as they say, if you put the Venn diagram, right, of the anti-vaxxers. And so here's the point. Like the term that is being used for that phenomenon is MAGA. This idea of this harshening, it's so far anti-woke, the pendulum has swung all the way to fascism, and the more cruelty, the better. I mean, even after they threw Senator Padilla down and handcuffed him, you saw the Speaker of the House with his shit-eating grin talk about how he should be charged or he should be censured. Like, they are going full tilt. Even on Fox News, you see Jesse Waters going on about how we're so back, right? There's this absolute pendulum swing away from any kind of small L liberal democracy values. And if we don't fight back now with everything in us, we will lose that. And it's no king's protest tomorrow, not just in the United States in 2,000 cities now, but across the world. And the reason being is that there is still always time to push back against fascism, against authoritarianism, against violence, against the lack of care for other human beings. There has always been opportunities to do this. And as a good friend of mine reminded me today, activism requires optimism. So we have to put within the frame the fact that Trump's numbers are tanking. Might make him more violent and extreme, but it shows that the American people are finally waking the fuck up a little bit here. We see extra support for Ukraine, just got military planes from Finland for Zelensky, and him being invited to the G7 by Carney is a signal that we're going to fight against the fascism crawling across Europe, right? I mean, there is a pushback that is necessary. These guys haven't gotten away with it yet, but that's the reason why we do the OShow, is pro-democracy promotion. We have to understand that sitting on our phones and bitching about it on a hashtag is not going to be the same as demanding the RCMP flood their offices, saying where is the update on the investigation into the Ford Greenbelt corruption? Like, where is it? We pay your fucking salaries. Let's see it, right? We want to know how we're going to stop this threats coming from Alberta and this separation shit. I mean, I feel like Carney is doing a really good job, but Canadians can speak up loudly, like they're doing at hockey games and stuff, go Oilers, where it's like, we love Canada, shut the fuck up. We've got this threat from the United States coming at us. We've got, Alberta, Daniel Smith trying to take the moment, but again, on the optimism side, Poilievre's popularity numbers are so in the toilet now that it's like, what, a 70-point gap between him and Carney? So Canadians are, bye, Polyev. So Theo did a great cartoon on that. It was like Looney Tunes and, all done. He's gone. Show's over. Bye. I hope so. I told Theo not to tease us like that. But my point is this, Mark and Keith, and then I'll go to you, Keith. Amidst all the darkening clouds, there are hopeful signs of sunshine. American people taking to the streets every single day, right? Yeah. Europe rearming itself and taking control with this shit in Ukraine and pushing back against Putin, right? Zelensky's drone attack. I mean, there are things that are happening that show that the good guys and the good women and the good people of this earth aren't just rolling over for this. Keith?
Well, the whole MAGA dehumanization of immigrants has really just, I think, led to this attitude that Mark was talking about of screw the world, screw everybody, screw the rules.
Yeah.
Americans are watching Trump do what he said he was going to do in that Mike Harris sense. I told you I was going to deport 1 million people or 20 million or whatever his number claimed. He's going for it. Yeah. And Americans are witnessing this. Yeah. And some are saying, okay, enough is enough. You're just anybody who's brown and standing outside a Home Depot is in danger, for Christ's sake. They don't even ask for names. They're just running. It's astronomical. Show me your papers. Well, it's, Nazi Germany type stuff. And yet there are still, we are seeing protests, and we're going to see them, as you say, the No Kings protest on Saturday around the world, hopefully. Yep. But it needs to be the Americans. It needs to be the Americans standing up and saying, enough. We can't keep treating people like this. Okay, we have an immigration problem. Biden really screwed up the immigration. No two ways at the border, the southern border was a disaster. We have to correct that, but we can do it in a much more humane way that doesn't have half of the population themselves just scared to death. Yep. They're afraid to go to an appointment if they get a court date that they're supposed to appear to make their regular, visa appearances.
They're afraid to go to their kids' graduations.
They're afraid to go anywhere. This is not how people should be living. And yet we're not seeing enough of a protest. Like those protests we saw in LA and all that was 1 square mile downtown. LA is one huge city. That was, it looked really, really bad, like it was on fire, like it was in the burning a couple of years ago. No, this was really restricted. What we're seeing are committed protesters, and often these are family members you're seeing out there, people who their relatives are being rounded up, or they're scared of being rounded up. We need to see Americans saying enough is enough. We need to see.
And Keith, it's not just that they're being rounded up and like put in some detention center down the street while they're getting their immigration processed. The Trump administration deliberately did night flights to a gulag in El Salvador to scare the shit out of everybody. And that U.S. senator who was thrown to the ground, I believe I heard an interview with him today saying that he wasn't sure where he was going to end up, right? I mean, it's mind-boggling, the lack of rule of law. And I swear to God, if I see any Canadian journalists try to conflate what's happening in the US in the sense that Canada has lost the rule of law, or that, the Carney government is doing X, Y, Z, seriously, shut up. In Canada, we still have the rule of law. We are still a functioning democracy. We are not the US, but we are damn close to them with the largest unprotected border in the world. And I have said to a billion trolls, if I've said to one, I wouldn't care about your country if your country wasn't coveting mine. So as long as that regime that is throwing your senators to the ground, that is arresting members of Congress, that is treating human beings like garbage and throwing them into fucking gulags, as long as they're looking at us, I'm looking back, and I'm going to be loud about it, as we all should. Go ahead, whoever wants.
Well, Well, they're fighting with the courts too, as well, right? It's not just the media. It's like nonstop challenge with the courts. They know they're going to end up in court and these things, and they keep appealing, writing, as Trump does even in his personal life. He finally lost again today in that E. Jean Carroll case. He's going to have to pay her that $5 million for that rape allegation. He's still fighting that. So this is what this government does. Just hire a bunch of lawyers. As Trump said, does he have a duty to uphold the Constitution? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Okay. So just hire the lawyers and let them deal with all the fallout from what he's doing. And that's, it's easy to say, and a lot of people do, ignore what he's doing. Just ignore Trump. Well, we can't ignore Trump. When we see they're like literally challenging the courts to that degree, politicizing everything. And the Republicans, as you know, they've not only caved, they're now taking glee in watching this, in watching a senator being slammed to the floor, instead of everyone in the House calling that just outrageous and having Christie known before the panel and saying, what is your staff doing? What on earth is your security doing? Have the security fire. I mean, no one gets thrown to the ground for asking a question, let alone a senator at a news conference where, I'm sorry, asking questions is what happens at news conferences. I remember when that Nazi Ernst Zundel used to show up and ask questions at news conferences in Toronto. He didn't get tackled and taken to the ground. He got answers. Like, this is to see that happen to a senator. And then the blatant lies from the White House and the Republican administration, the Trump White House. Well, he was rushing the state. No, he wasn't rushing. He was standing still. He wasn't, like, all of it. It's just, they just respond with blatant lies as if the truth doesn't matter. And to them, it doesn't, because if they say it, I think it's a magic 3 times, it then is the truth in their mind.
But
so they're good with it.
But it's the truth. It becomes the truth. I mean,
it's
Orwellian, right? Don't believe your eyes, right? It's the great lie. And what's so painful, I think, for those of us who have any indication or background in history or read anything or 1984 or whatever, it's playbook stuff. Like, Mark, we are looking at a playbook for authoritarianism, for fascism, and we can anticipate the moves. And I said on X, where I still stay because we've got tons of followers, and also that's where the maggots are coming in from. I say to them, you know what? Like, all of you who said I had Trump derangement syndrome for the last 10 years since I went on Charles Adler in 2014 and warned about Trump and these fucking fascist tendencies, like, fuck you. I was right. I didn't want to be. I don't like it, but it's a playbook. It's not like we're imagining or creating. He's literally doing what was done in Germany in the 1930s, and we can watch it, and the next steps are worse. And he's only been in for 4.5 months, Mark.
Well, I want to get back to your point about hope and optimism. And I think, this is what I see. America is a country that was founded on revolution, right? And I don't think America has lost that spirit. I think people are growing increasingly concerned about what they're seeing. I'm not sure. I know a lot of people say, well, he's just doing what he said he was going to do. His first term was a joke. Like, it was just a, and I think people maybe thought that this was going to be another one of those kind of like, oh, it'll just be entertainment. America's is addicted to reality TV. Trump gives them reality TV. He feeds them reality TV while they are raping the riches of the land. It's literally like all of this stuff that you see is done on purpose. It's done to distract the public, to keep the media, to keep everybody running around following all of these, things, so that Trump, and his, handpicked, his son's handpicked cabinet. I mean, Trump's cabinet was all picked by Don Jr. These are all Don Jr.'s buddies, right? Like, we need to, like, Trump doesn't give a shit. He had nothing to do with picking this cabinet. And you can tell. I mean, they're all a bunch of frat boys and frat girls, and it's like crazy, but they are the perfect reality television show. Like, you could literally cast these people on a reality television show and it would be great. So I think that, Americans are starting to rise up. Yeah, it starts in the blue states, and they're specifically going after them. But I think Trump should be careful what he asks for, because is America willing to really cross the line, right? I mean, we're warning them. You're warning them. We're all warning them. Everybody's trying to warn them. But are they really ready to cross the line? I don't think so. I think that you're going to see a massive swing in the midterms. I think you're gonna, and if the Dems or whatever, and I'm not like the Dems, I get why the Dems are being quiet, because they're like, just keep our fucking heads down.
But they might not get a midterm. I mean, if there is a this weekend, if the fucking Marines fire on protesters this weekend, If they do, and there is not a condemnation of that and mass investigations and holy shit, we've crossed the Rubicon into full-on military state. If that happens, there's not going to be midterms. Why would Trump allow all his power and all of his grift and all of his billions for that entire kleptocracy? You think that cabinet that has destroyed almost everything they had going for them as a nation so they can enrich themselves, do you think they're going to say, oh no, go ahead and have elections and we'll abide by the results? I mean,
I'm trying to be optimistic, Laura.
I know, so like there's a role for optimism, because I do with you. I hope Americans, they're more concerned by now than we are, and I really hope that our neighbors, and I have family in the U.S. I really, really, really hope you're right. But I also think we need to be a little Paul Revere here. I mean, we have to let people know what the next step looks like.
It's going to take a provocative event, and I think sending in the Marines, who the generals have said are not trained in de-escalation.
Nope.
That's not a thing for them. They see an opponent, they shoot that and kill that opponent. That's what they're trained to do. They are not trained in, and again, that whole constitutional thing and using your own armed forces against your own civilians, you just can't do that. But he's already there. But if you actually send him in, other than having him stand around a federal building, that, because if they do go in and they're not trained in de-escalation, it could become a massacre. They're not coming in with rubber bullets and smoke bombs. So I don't know. I think
Keith, they shot a reporter. You saw when they shot that reporter? That wasn't even the Marines. That was just the guard. They took aim and shot a reporter at 15
with a microphone, clearly, speaking into a microphone. It was with like very obviously a reporter. All of this is, as you say, they're pushing the boundaries, taking it as far as they possibly can in so many ways. And I think that's where in Canada, we do still have a rule of law. Yeah. We definitely have some bail issues. Repeat offenders getting bail. How if you have a second offense while you're already on bail, do you get a second chance from a judge? I don't understand that. I never will.
We got problems. We've got problems.
We got problems, but we don't have.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we still have courts that we believe in. We still have politicians that don't call each other Nazis unless they actually are Nazis doing Nazi-like things. It's just we're reasonable because we're taking a reasoned approach. We don't want to lose what we have. We haven't lost it. We're not going to lose it. We're going to have to defend it and fight for it.
I don't know if you saw it, but a top columnist in this country, and I'm not going to name him because I'm so pissed off, I don't even want to say it, put out a tweet today saying that under Mark Carney, there's no rule of law. There's no... Did you guys see that shit?
Yeah.
My response was, are you fucking kidding me? I mean, I know you got to make money with these provocative headlines, but given what's going on in the U.S., literally, they are not just in a constitutional crisis. They are on the cliff of full-on fascism. And I'm sorry... I know we live in Canada, and I fucking wish that we had a giant wall and that we were 10 million miles away, but we're not. So this matters to us. And to have a Canadian journalist who's not even part of the MAGA crew put out something so irresponsible, don't fucking conflate us with what's happening down there. Tell us the truth about our problems in this country, but don't you dare try to make headlines or clicks by saying we're like them, because then you know what happens? People say, oh, well, fuck it, there's nothing we can do anymore. They give up on our democracy. Like, we have to call that out every time we see it. Shame. Yeah. Shame.
Especially after what has it been, a month since the election or 2 months? Like I've been watching quite with great interest how some journalists have really tried to kind of pivot to attacking the new Carney government, which really, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm a former journalist. Like, I still feel like the paint is pretty fresh. Yeah. And, I feel like he needs a little bit, like the whole thing about not bringing in a budget. I don't get the anger about that. I think that it was a sensible approach. I think, I see people criticizing this sudden commitment to defense spending. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the world is like, we're literally on the brink of another war, a world war, and you're criticizing a government for doing what we should have done a long time ago. And maybe 2% isn't even enough, but it's a start.
I said on the radio 3%.
And it's creating the conditions, though. It's creating the conditions to, now we look at the G7 summit this weekend, and Carney is like fucking making deals, man. Like, I mean, I mean, honestly, like this stuff and that appointment of I forget the gentleman's name, but I know as the new head of the public service. I mean, there is some really strong systemic stuff going on with this government that is completely different from the previous government.
Yes,
that to me shows confidence, that shows a vision, that shows that they're putting the things in place to protect this country long term. And with the defense spending, I mean, I love the idea that we could, you know, with our steel industry being threatened by the US and other industries we could completely like domesticate our own defense production and create jobs and all this stuff. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. If I will be ready to criticize this government when I feel like they deserve it, because I'm not a hyper partisan. Like I'm, you know, but like, come on, give it a rest. Like, I feel like everything so far has been beyond what I could have expected in this short amount of time.
Carney's been a star. He's been a freaking star. The whole world thinks that, right? I get emails from American viewers of the OShow and of my social all the time saying, we wish we had Carney. We're watching the kind of leadership that, like, they're nostalgic for, you know, a leader that has values. Now, Carney is not a leftist leader, and I couldn't care less because I'm not a leftist. I just want to have a safe country. I want everyone to do well. I want people to not live on the streets in abject poverty. I want my kids to have a future and an education. And you know, my daughter said to me, she's very wise. She follows all of this. And she said, you know what, Mom, I'm hoping that the worst of the worst happens before I have my kids. Because then maybe we can be a post-war generation and my family will have.
Yeah, our kids are the same age, Laura. I know. Like I feel that same, I think, every day about, you know, my beautiful child and the fucking shit show that we are just like willingly, apparently just gonna pass on to them. Like, here you go. Fuck, take care. Like it's like that. Like, I can't believe even people in the MAGA movement can't look at their own children and say, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Like, what are we leaving?
I have a 16-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. And if you're not watching what's happening with Putin in Ukraine and what's happening in the US, and you don't think there's a possibility that our kids are going to be in a war, you're not paying attention, right?
We're on the edge. We're on the edge of World War III. When we saw, you mentioned the last 24 hours, Israel attacking Iran, the United States saying, we know nothing about Israel going to attack Iran.
Oh, bullshit.
Israel said bullshit. Of course they did. We told them we weren't going to go in there without telling the Americans first.
Americans pulled out their people from Americans pulled out their people from the embassies like 2 days before. Like, did Iran not think something was about to happen? Holy shit.
Now Trump's bragging and saying, I told Iran 60 days, this is day 61. I knew about this all along, right?
Yeah, it's that. Like that they're using this as just another political fucking game. We've got the Ukraine situation. I mean, it's just so scary. And we have the Republicans clearly losing interest in Ukraine. It's just so far away, you know, and it's just costing us a lot of money. And we'll get their minerals later. It's insane, the type of thinking that's going on right now.
And we have millions of people being herded and starved in Gaza and shot to come to get food. I mean, we're watching. We are, as the Pope said, we're in World War III. In fact, just on a personal note of privilege, my husband was covering the Pope's, the moment the smoke came up and the Pope came out, and he was deeply struck by the Pope's first words being about peace. Right. And it moved him deeply. And he's met other popes and covered a lot of world events. And, we are in World War III, according to the Pope, and he's got a good vantage point on it. And, we shouldn't lose hope, but we also shouldn't be Pollyannic just because we're busy and there's something more amusing on our phone. Right?
Well, this is where I think Carney is using the G7 to its best effect at this point. He's taken heat for inviting Modi, especially after what, India is accused of doing in Canada. What are we going to do? Cut off the world's second largest democracy? Or
like, biggest population now, isn't India?
I think there's. No, you can't isolate India. It's smart to bring them in, and we need to deal with them. Absolutely, inviting a lot of people. That this is what the prime minister gets to do. And why is he inviting the prime minister or the president of Mexico?
Yeah,
probably because we're getting a deal.
Right.
I mean, it strikes that he's getting deals, and hopefully, what we're really going to see here is a deal with the Americans. If it's only a bilateral deal, that's fine. I can't see a deal that would actually eliminate the tariffs, but if they can take the tariffs down to like 10% where people can live and breathe and businesses can have some confidence in investing in the future, I think it will restore some normality to the markets and just everyone being able to take a breath and basically come back to reality. But that's a hope. And I think that's one thing that's unique about this particular G7 is expectations are raised really, really high.
Yeah.
Carney has in part done it himself, but it's because his reputation has brought this along. We're looking to him to have some deals here. And why does they invited these specific people? Well, he's brought Zelensky in as well, which I think is really, really important as a signal to the world. because the Americans are not the stranding force behind Ukraine that they were. They're just not. And it looks like they're looking for an off-ramp. They're looking for a way out to get some of their money back. That's not what Canada or most of the world is doing. So I think Carney is in the right spot here. I haven't heard, usually at G7s and G20s and these sorts of meetings, all you hear about more than anything is the protests. And that doesn't even seem to be an issue at this particular time. I think people are focused on, they want to see what the world is going to do.
Yep.
Who's making deals with who, who's working together with who. In all sense, can we all work together with or without Trump? Can we ignore him when we need to and not ignore him when we have to? And is he going to come in like he did the last time that it was in Canada? Remember, there's that great picture of him sitting at the table with his arms folded and all the other leaders standing around him. He's just like, I'm not doing that. He was just a petulant little baby. What's he going to be this time? Is he going to come in as the dictator? Is he going to come in as the savior? I'm going to stop World War III. I've got to deal with Ukraine. I've got, as you say, it's the 61st day. I'm going to stop it. No, he's not going to have any of that. But I think he is going to come in with bullshit and bluster, as he usually does, and try and dominate everything.
But Carney, I don't know if you heard this morning on the news, guys, but I know, Mark, especially you being in government and you in comms, you understand this. Carney has anticipated that. Yep. And instead of trying to get a large joint statement out of the G7, which of course Trump kiboshed in 2018, and it was a giant mess, Carney is like, we're not going to try for that because we've got, my words, not Carney's, a freaking toddler, rational toddler, mad king at the table. We're going to go for short statements that Trump can agree to or not kibosh. Literally, they are changing how the G7 operates to make it sort of Trumpy proof if they can, so they can get productivity. And I got to say, from a historical context, guys, I don't know if you go to Quebec City a lot. I really love Quebec City, and we take those horse tours. And right by the wall, there's a statue of Winston Churchill, and Gandhi's on the other side of the wall because of how Churchill felt about Gandhi or whatever. But the Churchill statue is partly because at the Chateau Frontenac, apparently, during the war, there was a meeting where there was a discussion around, if not the D-Day invasion, some other high, confidentiality thing, and the documents got lost, and some hotel staff found them. My point being this, is that it made me think of that, the fact that Carney is going to have the leaders of the world in Alberta this weekend. And he, thank God, is a guy who seems to know how to deal with that level of things and has some actual real ideas and good values. But I feel like we're watching not just the coalition of the willing, I feel like we're watching the allies, the meeting together in Canada again and figuring out how the hell to protect liberal democracy around the world. Am I overstating this moment, Mark?
No, I think what I thought was really interesting to read and helpful was both Chrétien and I think it was Manley or somebody, they were at a conference this week, and they both suggested that just everybody at the G7 just needs to, if Trump does something stupid, just ignore it. Don't get sucked into it. Just kind of keep riding above the surf and don't let him derail, because it's quite likely he could come in and just do what he always does, use this as an opportunity to create more bullshit, right? And more distraction. And the advice was, and I'm sure that this advice wasn't really needed. I'm sure that all the the other G7 leaders and everybody else that's going to be there is probably let him make a fool of himself, and then we can show ourselves as united and strong together. And I think, I look at the G7 as an opportunity for Canada and Carney specifically to forge new and more powerful relationships. And to Keith's point about Modi, that's exactly what it was. I know a lot of people were mad about inviting the Saudi crown prince as well, but at the end of the day, that's a wealth fund. That's a sovereign wealth fund. There's opportunity for investment, partnerships with other and it's also a strategic partnership, because the Saudis are literally the most powerful, part of the Arab world. They are the most powerful in the Arab world, building alliances outside of the United States. Canada showing leadership, Canada showing a commitment to partnering and to making deals with and alliances with other countries outside the US. I feel like that's the signal that I'm feeling from this G7 is sure, of course we invited Trump. And if he wants to make a deal with us all, we're more than happy. But we're not look at what China did. China waited Trump out and they won. They fucking won. I mean, everybody's figured it out. And all of this
Trump is taco, man. He can't never follow through. Right? Like, I'll never eat a chicken taco the same way again. But to your point, though, I didn't intend on this being the G7 special of the OShow Scandal panel, but why the hell not? Because you know what? It is a moment that will be in history. You've got Trump trying to change America into a fascist regime by the minute. You've got what are said to be the largest protests against a government since they protested the king. Maybe they're going to throw tea in the Boston Harbor. Who knows?
Tesla's.
But I mean, like, it's going to be a hell of a summer, a hell of a weekend. And to have Carney, he said, like, we're not like fantasizing, woo, Carney. Carney said, since the US doesn't want to lead the G7 in the free world anymore, I will. Canada will. Let's go for it. And now he's got that backdrop, as I said on last week's show, while Trump is doing the other crazy shit he's doing in the US and the world is roiling and we're in World War III, you've got the Canadian Prime Minister inviting all the world leaders, even the ones we don't like, to Canada to stand on a fucking mountain and say, you know what? We're going to multilateralize this world. We're going to figure out a workaround around this crap, and we're going to try to save this fucking world. I mean, that's where we're at. And you know what? It's not that I am in love with Carney. The second he screws up, I'll be the first one on him. It's the fact that we have this moment at the very moment that the US is doing its ultimate play for a fascist military regime. They are sending troops to other cities. We heard this morning. This is not going to end well unless the world stands up. And Canada is the one who's talk about a reality show. Carney is producing the reality show of the planet this weekend.
Well, let me tell you, no one is going to miss a G7 communique at the end of this conference. When I was a reporter covering these things, when they finally used to get these communiques, my first thought was always, this was written before we got here.
Right, yes.
And then later you can tell, as I learned more later, it was written before we got here. So then the 7 or 10 or however many, there was a G8 in there, they could negotiate the exact wording and come up with a communique that said nothing essentially at the end. They were virtually useless to everyone except the people involved in trying to write the damn things, because it was very hard to get everyone to agree on the language. Bringing Trump in, forget it. Let's just go with statements from each world leader as we need. In other words, the host, Prime Minister Carney, will be putting out a statement on what happened at the G7, and he gets to say what happened at the G7. Trump can react all he wants or whatever he wants to do, but I think to the point that both you and Mark have made, the whole world gets to watch this from a beautiful spot in Alberta, and they're going to get to see Trump either behave like an adult or behave like he has been in, the big baby Don, the chicken taco Don, the kind of stuff. He's very, very sensitive to this kind of stuff. So hopefully a couple of, drop it when they're saying the photo op, someone says, who's got a taco? I mean, it's just a couple of little references like that to just throw him off his game. But I don't think he can be thrown off his game because his game is just all in his mind. He doesn't see anything else even around him. So I think Trump is still going to be Trump, and the world's going to get a real good look at Trump, a real good look at Canada and our leadership. Okay. And the Europeans and the other, and see how we're building out. And I think it's going to help the rest of the world realize we can all deal. There's a lot of alliances to be built here, trading alliances with countries that are stable, that want to have predictable trading relationships, and won't break every deal we've signed, calling it a shitty deal, even though I made it.
Canada is creating the new world order because it's been forced on us that there has to be a new one, right? The post Second World War, and FDR said at the time, I hope that this world order lasts as long as people in this room have, memories or whatever of it. And now we've passed that point, and the world forgot the lessons of that horrific time. And so now a new world order is being forced on the world, and to have not just Canada sort of in the middle of the mise en scène or whatever, to have us leading it. Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I look at Putin in Ukraine, and I look at Trump in Los Angeles and all the other shit he's doing, and I look at what's happening in Gaza, and I say to what's happening, the pressure Taiwan's under, and I say to myself, so if we're in a third world war, like every morning I have to process all that horrible stuff, including the people who died in that Indian air crash. I just want to give my thoughts to those families as well. It is really dystopic. And then I say to myself, oh, wait a second. We have someone super confident running Canada. this could turn out to be not just a reset for the world in a different but positive way, but it could be advantage Canada for the next 50 years. Why not? As I said last week, and my daughter said, we've got the resources, we've got the fresh water, we've got the giant land mass, we keep our sovereignty and we make multilateral deals, we can have a very successful century for Canada. That would be, we've always been the good guys on the world stage, if not, kind of like not really the powerful ones, but the good ones.
Yeah.
Now we can be the good ones with power.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is Canada's opportunity to shine. I think we have the right person in place to, someone with worldly experience. I think Canadians made the right choice in terms of, and maybe it was fortunate that we didn't fall. I think of what's happening in the States right now, and if Pierre had been elected, if the Conservative Party had been elected in this country, it would have just given them a license to kind of like, hey, if it works down there, let's do this kind of stuff here. We're so fortunate that we didn't choose that path, and that we do have, and that there are other great leaders in this world like Macron and others in other countries who haven't fallen, who haven't taken the bait of like, hey, it looks like I could do whatever I want right now and still stay in power. They're still upholding democracy. They're still, they have humanity and humility. And Canadians leading the world is not or helping to guide the world is not a bad thing. It's actually a pretty good thing. And I think to myself as well, all of this chaos and all of this, we've been living in this now for 5 or 6 years now of this
So
kind of
10 years ago, Trump came down the escalator. Remember?
Right. Okay. 10 years.
Yeah.
And what has happened in that time? Affordability has gotten worse. Right. Housing has gotten worse. More war, more conflict, more. So, maybe, I don't know, but maybe right-wing populism isn't such a great idea. I don't know. How much more evidence do we need? Things were much better. I don't care if it was conservative, Republican, Democrat, whatever. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the world was a much better place because we had people, regardless of party stripe, who put democracy before everything.
And decency. And decency.
Al Gore, 25 years ago, Al Gore was the ultimate example of just putting, because he pissed a lot of us off, quite frankly, he gave in too soon, but he put democracy ahead of himself, ahead of his party, ahead of everything, essentially. That's not easy to do, especially when your own party wants to lynch you for doing it. Yeah. But he did it for the good of democracy.
And do you remember how we all watched the evening news waiting to see if the hanging Chads in Florida were going to go towards Gore or towards Bush? But we didn't see the fucking military stand there, intimidating the people counting the hanging Chads. So before we sound like a bunch of old people on the front porch here, having kids who are teens keeps you a little younger. It's a little stressful, but also, I'm not turning this into a parenting pod, but also it keeps you a little bit more in tune. And one of the things that I had to say to my kids, I forget, honestly, there's so much terrible stuff that's gone on in the last 2 weeks. I forget which night it was. I saw my kids outside by the fire having a conversation. I went out and I said, guys, what are you talking about? And they said, oh, we're looking at our phones. It's one of the latest horrific things that happened in the world. I can't even remember which one. And I just said to them, I can't imagine what it's like to be 14 or 16 and to have every bit of world news coming in all the time with no filters and no idea of journalistic rigor and no idea of what's true and what's false and no way to hide from the images that are horrific that we would have never seen, at their age. But I have to believe that we have generations who are smarter, who have better access to solutions that are going to come out of this with like a whole better world. Our challenge, guys, and the challenge of everyone watching and listening to the OShow is to not just passively sit by and hope that happens, right? Like we can't just hope that our kids can figure this shit out because we have to leave them something to work with. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that how this weekend goes in the US and how this summer goes in the US is going to affect the next 50 years of this planet. So guys, you've both been incredibly generous with your time. I didn't want to bug you after the election because you were here so much and it's obviously excellent coverage. But because you've both committed to come back during this summer, whatever this summer will become, and we'll have you on frequently, let me just end this with asking you guys to give a kind of a rating of your level of alarm. And maybe you can also give me then a rating of your level of hope, because I think both things can exist in our minds at the same time. So, because I don't think we can like negate one with the other. So, and then we'll check in. I'll check in because I really feel like Canadians are like, should I just be gardening and having barbecues, or should I be on the streets in solidarity with the No Kings movement? Like, where is the level? So let me start with you, Mark. Where is the level of alarm for you? And also, where's the level of hope, given all the things we just talked about, you know, the G7 and Carney and whatnot?
I think that my level of alarm is high because of the things that I think about every day now that I never thought about before. And, you know, these are things like, you know, like if I had to, would I be willing to die for a cause? Like, would I be willing to put, not saying like, but like, would I be willing to go to a protest and be potentially shot? Because that's what I'm seeing down in California. I'm seeing this stuff. I mean, I know they're not using live ammunition, but still, would I be willing to do that? You know, because I may have to. I think of things like, you know, should I get a gun license so that I can be prepared to fight for this country and fight for my family if need be? And I've never been a gun person. Honestly, like I've never thought of having a gun. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that, you know, are indicators to me that I'm very worried. And then on the hope factor, you know, I still see a lot of good in this world every day. And I think sometimes we don't pay enough. And I see the hope in my child. She, you know, and my daughter, she, you know, she still is very naive, but she's still very hopeful about the future. And, you know, so that gives me, you know, I even though she's being bombarded, even though she's, you know, getting fake, and she's smart, she asks me, she sees something on social media, she says, Dad, this right? And she's wise.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have to be hopeful because I care so much about her and other kids having the kind of life that I've had, and which had no real threats, and, you know, a really good life. So, you know, I can't get down. I got to be hopeful. So
I got you. So if we had to score you for numbers' sake, so I can track it, you're on.
Okay, so are we going DEF CON or 1 out of 10? Because I don't know.
The DEF CON always fucks me up because it's backwards to the way
I know.
I think DEF CON 5 should be the worst, but DEF CON. So let's just go 1 to 10. Easier for me. I'm stuck at that.
My worry meter is probably 7.
Okay, and your hope meter?
Probably 6.
All right, so we're balanced. Keith, what about you, my friend?
Well, I'll put numbers off the top. I'm going to go with a typical Canadian. I'm a 5 on each. I'm alarmed. You know, if you give me 3 choices, guess which I'm going for.
Yeah.
The one in the middle. You know, Mark's point about a gun license, actually, it's the first time in my life I considered that, where I live in rural Nova Scotia, semi-rural Nova Scotia. Yeah. I mean, if they are coming across the board, and I also hate guns. My brother finally, a couple of years ago, took me to a gun range because I'd never shot a gun. Our dad was a hunter. I'd never shot a gun, wouldn't go hunting. And I shot a handgun, and I wouldn't even finish the clip. I just hated it. It was too loud. I was like, I'm just not a gun. I, too, have thought about this since then. Not to the point where I went to the Canadian Tire to apply, but it's in my, like, so that concerns me because I've never, ever had that kind of thought in my head before. But the hope is there. And I see what's happening in the United States as something that can be contained to the United States. Of course, there'll always be some spillover in Canada. It's just the way, everything, their media influence on us is just so great. There'll always be a 10 to 20%, I think, of Canadians who are leaning very heavily towards the U.S. and even towards what Trump thinks. But I don't think that that's most Canadians. I think the country doesn't feel broken. It's not going to be broken. Yeah. I'm hopeful about that. You both talked about your kids and their teens. I'm concerned about how kids are ever going to know the truth about what they're seeing online. When we were that age, we weren't even seeing those images. That shit was coming on TV. We weren't looking at that. We were outside. Forget that. Now it's coming to them, whether they want it or it's coming to them.
We were outside till the porch light.
Exactly. Or the street light. And they're dealing with as well this whole flooding the zone, and that's what Trump's all about. There's just so much going on that we as adults can't keep up with it, can't figure out what's true and what's not, stay on top of it, all the latest development. Oh, the court flipped on this. What? Who knows? So how are kids supposed to know what's true? And I've already seen videos online saying, show your boomer grandparents this, hi, I'm this and this, and I'm fake, as a whale jumps in the background and stuff, because there's so much fake. I think we need to show the kids those same videos. They're going to catch on to them quicker than we do. They're going to be better at it in the long run of sussing out what's fake than we are, because they've had to. They're going to grow up with it. But how they ever determine what to have any trust in, I mean, as a journalist, we were never high. I mean, we were usually below the used car salesman on the respect level, but people didn't think we were criminal or liars or anything else. We were there to do a job. We irritated a lot of people, but we did a very necessary job. That's not it anymore. There's no define. How do you know what a journalist is? Anyone who's online says they're a journalist. And I'll go back to my the Morley Safer, who was on 60 Minutes for years. He was a Canadian. And when he was asked this, he's been dead 15 years at least. So, I mean, he was asked this a while ago. He was asked what he thought about citizen journalism. He says, I feel about it exactly the same way I feel about citizen surgery. I've never forgotten it for that reason.
That's a great line.
It really is. So kids, they're not going to know that journalists actually had ethics and a code of conduct and rules to behave by. Training, everything, all of it. And none of that is there now. So they're going to have to determine that themselves.
Well, I have to say, though, in defense of citizen journalists, the real ones, guys like Joey Coleman, who have
absolutely.
They started because corporate media was letting down the public, right?
No one was at Hamilton City Hall. Joey came in. Absolutely.
Being eviscerated. So there are citizen journalists, great publications in this country that I absolutely support, who follow journalistic rigor and produce things at great cost to themselves, and we should all support them. The OShow is not a journalism show. I make a point of saying I'm a former journalist. Mark is a former journalist. We're here. It's called the Opinion Show for a reason. Yep. But also having conversations as independent new media is super important in this country because of the collapse and the buyout and the avarice of corporate media, right? So, but to the point about media literacy, financial literacy, I hope our kids all learn that as priority. But I think values are what's going to carry the day and carry our future. And your kids have good values. My kids have good values. They understand that what they're seeing is wrong, even though there's all this hype and bullshit and propaganda. Like they literally have pretty good propaganda lenses. Now, we're a media literate family because we're in the media. I mean, full disclosure, my husband's at the G7 right now covering it. I mean, it's all day, all the time in our house. And they have friends in school who don't even know who the president or the prime minister is, who don't even know there's elections. So I'm not suggesting media literacy is caught on yet, but I think media literacy is key. Values are key. And if I can just score it on that metric, my biggest radar of alarm, guys, is that if the Americans don't get control over this attempted military coup of their democracy, then there's nothing to stop them from taking our country, right? The bulwark is gone. So to my friends out there in America, we feel deeply for you. We have been trying to warn you from our vantage point for years, but I understand when you're the frog in the pot, it's hard to know you're boiling. But now that you're trying to jump out of that pot and save yourselves, we really, really need you to do that for yourselves, for all of our family down there, for how much we love your country, but also because if you can't stop him, what is the bulwark for our country, right? This is a global impact. So no King's Day, everybody out there around the world, we're doing this for the entire free world. And so I wish them courage. And as Nicole Wallace said on a podcast, which I thought was brilliant, she was echoing someone else, but it's not that she's not afraid. It's that she doesn't see being silent as any safer, right? So speak up. Because you're not safe anyway. You might as well fight till your last breath to keep the kind of country that you need, that Canada needs. And I know that at the G7, Carney's probably going to impress the world, and there'll be new deals and new opportunities. And so my fear rating, if you will, my alarm is at an 8.
Okay.
But my hope, give it a strong 6, and we'll see what happens after the No Kings protest. And guys, next time I have you on, we will check in again and see where we're at. I want to thank you so much, Mark Cripps. As always, you bring the fire and the honesty, and people freaking love it. And Keith, you always bring that true Canadian sense of you've seen a few things, you keep Canadian balance. You got to set it. I don't think I've ever been at a 5 in my life on anything. So I deeply appreciate the stabilizing impact on the O Show. To all of you who are out there who subscribe, please do. And if you haven't caught the episode with Charlie Angus, I got to have him back because he's fighting the Canadian resistance. And man, over 10,000 of you looked at that right away. Plus, of course, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, we get in our views on our clips. Please subscribe, share it. This is a pro-democracy conversation. We don't always get it right, but we're always coming from the right place. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, hopefully a peaceful weekend, but a weekend that defines the future. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yes.
Have a nice weekend.
You guys are awesome. It'll be interesting.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the old show. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the old show. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the OShow. It's the OShow. Lord Babcock's the OShow. And with a lot of great gas, she puts them to the test on the OShow. Yeah, there's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the OShow. You gotta stand for something or fall for it all. Canada, you hear the call of the OShow. It's a podcast, the OShow. Lord Babcock's the OShow. Stay informed with the OShow, OShow.
Your merch bid.